Story by Africa, Mythic Tales. It started with the sound of scratching. At first, I thought it was the wind brushing against the house, but the noise was deliberate, too steady to be random. It came from the far side of the house, near the room my grandmother slept in. Long past midnight, with the rest of the family asleep, I lay awake, heart pounding. The slow clawing scrape against the wooden walls made me shiver. Then came the whispers. They were faint at first, barely audible, like leaves rustling against each other. But the sound grew clearer, more rhythmic, almost like chanting. It sent chills down my spine. Something wasn't right. I should have stayed in bed. I should have pretended I didn't hear anything. But curiosity got the better of me. What I discovered that night changed everything. I grew up in a small village deep in Kenya's rural heartland. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a steady, predictable pace. The days were filled with chores, laughter, and chatter, while nights were quieter, filled with the sounds of crickets and the occasional howl of a dog. But the silence of our village had its own weight. It wasn't just peace. It was a kind of silence that carried secrets. One of those secrets was my grandmother. Nyanya Wema was my father's mother. She had lived with us for as long as I could remember. She was old, very old, with silver hair that she always kept hidden beneath her red shawl. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, and her back was slightly hunched. She didn't talk much, and when she did, it was in short, clipped sentences. I don't think I ever heard her laugh. Most of the time, she kept to herself. She rarely ventured beyond the house and preferred to sit by the fire, her hands busy with some task, peeling potatoes, weaving baskets, or stirring a pot of herbs. She wasn't warm or affectionate like other grandmothers in the village. She never told us stories or gave us treats, but there was something else about her, something that made people uneasy. The villagers feared her. They didn't say it outright, but you could see it in the way they avoided her. Even the bravest children stayed far from her, refusing to play near our house. She has ways, they would whisper when they thought no one was listening. She's not just an old woman. I didn't understand what they meant. To me, she was just grandma, stern and distant, but harmless, or so I thought. The night it all began, my parents had gone to visit relatives in another town. They planned to return after 2 days, leaving me, my younger brother Kamau, and Nyanya alone in the house. Be good, Mama said as she kissed us goodbye, and listen to your grandmother. Nyanya didn't say much that evening. She sat in her usual spot by the fire, peeling sweet potatoes and humming softly. Kamau and I ate in silence, then went to bed. He fell asleep quickly, his small body curled under the blanket. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, restless for reasons I couldn't explain. That's when I heard the scratching. It started softly, like the sound of a mouse gnawing at wood. At first, I thought it was some stray animal outside, but the sound grew louder, more deliberate. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from Nyanya's room. I sat up, my heart pounding. I glanced at Kamau, but he was fast asleep. For a moment, I debated whether to ignore the sound and stay in bed. But then the whispers began. They were soft at first, almost melodic, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. But as I listened, I realized they weren't natural. They were rhythmic, like chanting, and they were coming from Nyanya's room. I slid out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and crept toward the hallway. The closer I got to her room, the colder the air became. It didn't make sense. Kenyan nights were warm even in the middle of the night, but this chill seeped into my skin, making me shiver. Her door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, my feet rooted to the ground. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, to return to bed and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But curiosity pushed me forward. Slowly, I peeked inside. Nyanya stood in the center of the room, her back to me. The dim light from the oil lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls. On the floor around her were strange carvings etched into the dirt, circles, lines, and patterns that seemed deliberate and precise. In the center of the carvings was a small wooden bowl. Its contents were dark and thick, glinting in the lamp's faint glow. Blood. I didn't need to touch it to know what it was. Nyanya's hands moved slowly, deliberately as she chanted. Her voice was low and rhythmic, speaking words I couldn't understand. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to look away. Then she stopped. Come in, Anjeri. Her voice was calm, almost sweet. My heart nearly stopped. How did she know I was there? Nyanya turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine. They weren't her usual tired, cloudy eyes. They were sharp, glinting with an intensity that made me feel exposed, as if she could see right through me. Her smile was crooked, unsettling. What are you doing up so late, my dear? She asked. I heard something, I stammered, my voice barely audible. I just wanted to check. Her gaze didn't waver. You should go back to bed, she said softly. Children need their rest. I nodded quickly, backing away. As I turned to leave, I noticed her shadow on the wall behind her. It wasn't hers. It was tall, hunched, with long, jagged limbs that didn't match her frail frame. I fled to my room, shutting the door behind me. My chest was tight, and my hands were trembling. I wanted to wake Kamau and tell him what I'd seen, but the words wouldn't come. What would I say? That grandma's shadow wasn't hers? That she was chanting over a bowl of blood? He wouldn't believe me. Even I could barely believe it. The next morning, Nyanya acted as though nothing had happened. She sat by the fire, humming to herself as she peeled sweet potatoes. Kamau ran outside, chasing chickens and laughing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Over the next few days, strange things started happening. Chickens disappeared from the coop, leaving behind only feathers. The goats refused to go near the side of the house where Nyanya's room was. Kamau fell ill, so ill that he could barely get out of bed. He had fever dreams, mumbling about shadows and a woman with no face. The village healer tried everything, but nothing worked. And then there were the nightmares. Every night I dreamed of Nyanya standing at the foot of my bed, her shadow stretching across the walls like it was alive. She never said anything, never moved, just stood there watching. When I woke up, I found scratches on my arms, thin and sharp, as though claws had raked across my skin. The scratching stopped after that first night, but the air in our house felt different, heavier. The days seemed quieter. Even the chirping of the birds outside felt subdued. Nyanya went about her usual routine, moving slowly through the house, humming that strange tune she always did. It was a melody that didn't feel like it belonged to this world. It rose and fell in ways that didn't make sense, like it was trying to tell a story no one understood. Kamau's illness got worse. He lay in bed drenched in sweat, his small chest heaving as he fought to breathe. His fever would spike at night, and he'd mutter words that chilled me to my core. She's coming, he whispered one night, his voice weak and raspy. She's here. I leaned closer, clutching his hand. Who, Kamau? Who's coming? He didn't answer. His eyes fluttering short as the fever pulled him under again. But I knew who he meant. He was talking about Nyanya. The village healer came again the next day, bringing her herbs and potions. She mixed a bitter-smelling concoction and held it to Kamau's lips, urging him to drink. When he managed a few sips, she turned to me, her face grave. This is beyond me, she said in a low voice. There's something unnatural at work here. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. She glanced toward Nyanya's room, her expression unreadable, then left without another word. That afternoon, while Nyanya was at the market, I made my decision. I had to know what was going on. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then slipped into her room. The smell hit me first, earthy, metallic, with a faint hint of something rotting. The room was dark, the only light coming from the small, soot-covered window. The dirt floor was bare. The strange symbols I'd seen that night now gone. But something felt off, like the room was holding its breath. I searched the room, my heart pounding. At first, I found nothing out of the ordinary, just her wooden stool, her small cot, and the clay jars she kept her herbs in. But then, under her mattress, I found it, an old leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked and worn, and the edges of the pages were frayed. My hands trembled as I opened it. The pages were filled with strange symbols, drawings of creatures that didn't look human, and words I couldn't read. As I flipped through the book, I came across a sketch that made my blood run cold. It was a drawing of a woman, her body twisted and elongated, her limbs unnaturally long. Her face was blank, with empty sockets where her eyes should have been. But what struck me most was her shadow. It was tall, hunched, with sharp, jagged edges. It was Nyanya's shadow. I slammed the book shut, my hands shaking. I wanted to run, to get as far away from that room as possible. But as I turned to leave, the door creaked open. Nyanya stood in the doorway, her face expressionless. But her eyes, they were blazing with something that wasn't human. "What are you doing in here, Njeri?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. I couldn't speak. My mouth was dry, and my legs felt like they were made of stone. Her gaze dropped to the book in my hands, and her expression darkened. "You shouldn't have touched that," she said, stepping into the room. "You've seen too much." I backed away as she advanced, her movement slow and deliberate. I didn't mean to." "Enough," she said, cutting me off. Her voice was louder now, almost a growl. "You need to understand." Before I could react, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was impossibly strong, her fingers like iron clamps around my arm. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment, everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of her room. My head was pounding, and the smell of earth and blood filled my nostrils. Nyanya was gone, but the book was still there, lying open beside me. The page it was turned to had a single word scrawled across it: Oburoni. Outsider. I ran out of the room, my heart pounding. I didn't stop until I reached the village elder's hut. I burst in, clutching the book, my words tumbling over each other as I tried to explain what had happened. The elder listened in silence, his face growing paler with each word. When I finished, he sat back, his expression grave. "She is not your grandmother," he said finally. "She hasn't been for a long time." The elder's words sank into me like cold water. "She is not your grandmother," he had said. The thought echoed in my mind, twisting and turning. If she wasn't my grandmother, then what was she? What had been living in our house all these years? And where was the real Nyanya Wema? I sat in the elder's hut, clutching the leather-bound book to my chest, my breath shallow and uneven. His face was pale, his expression grave, but I could see something else in his eyes. Fear. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "How do we stop her?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to a shelf lined with dusty jars and old wooden boxes. He opened one of the boxes and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, I saw that it held dried herbs, a few polished stones, and a small black feather. "This will help," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "But it won't be easy. She's powerful." He handed me the bundle and told me what needed to be done: a cleansing ritual, a fire strong enough to burn the book and sever whatever ties she had to this world, and above all, courage to face her and what she truly was. I returned home before nightfall, my heart pounding with every step. Kamal was still in bed, his fever worse than ever. Nyanya was in her corner by the fire, humming softly as she stirred a pot of herbs. She didn't look at me when I entered, but I could feel her gaze on me, heavy and cold. I went to my room and hid the bundle of herbs and stones under my mattress. The elder had warned me not to let her see them. She'll know what you're trying to do, he had said, and she'll fight back. The hours crawled by, each one heavier than the last. I could hear Nyanya moving about the house, her footsteps slow and deliberate. Kamal's breathing was shallow, his face pale and drenched in sweat. I kept glancing at the leather-bound book lying on my desk, its presence a constant weight in the room. Finally, the sun dipped below the horizon, and the house plunged into darkness. I lit a small fire in the hearth and began preparing for the ritual. I crushed the herbs and mixed them with water, murmuring the words the elder had taught me. My hands trembled as I worked, but I forced myself to keep going. Just as I finished, I heard footsteps behind me. Nyanya stood in the doorway, her shadow long and jagged on the wall behind her. Her face was calm, almost serene, but her eyes burned with something that wasn't human. "What are you doing, Angeri?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. I'm just making tea, I lied, though I knew she wouldn't believe me. Her gaze shifted to the bundle of herbs on the table, then to the leather-bound book beside it. Her expression darkened, and she took a step closer. "You think you can stop me?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You think your little rituals will save you?" I backed away, clutching the book to my chest. "You're not my grandmother," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't belong here." Her smile widened, and for the first time, she laughed, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. "You're right," she said. "I'm not your grandmother. I haven't been for a long time." The fire roared in the hearth as I threw the leather-bound book into the flames. Nyanya's laughter turned into a growl, her shadow stretching across the walls like it was alive. The symbols I had drawn on the floor began to glow, their lines pulsing with an otherworldly light. She lunged at me, her movements impossibly fast for someone her age. But the herbs and stones in the bundle worked as the elder had promised. They created a barrier, holding her back just enough for me to complete the ritual. The chanting words spilled from my lips, loud and desperate, as the fire grew brighter. Nyanya screamed, her voice a piercing wail that shook the walls. Her shadow writhed and twisted, pulling away from her body as if trying to escape. Then, with one final burst of light, the fire consumed the book completely. Nyanya's screams faded, and her shadow dissolved into nothingness. She collapsed to the ground, her red shawl crumpled around her. I stood there panting, staring at the frail figure lying before me. For a moment, I thought she was dead, but then her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me, not with anger, but with sadness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Before I could respond, her body faded, dissolving into ash. The room fell silent, the glow of the symbols fading until there was nothing left but the crackling of the fire. Kamal woke the next morning, his fever broken. The house felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I told Mama and Papa what had happened when they returned, though I'm not sure they believed me. The elder came to cleanse the house, burning herbs and reciting prayers to ensure whatever had been here was gone for good. But sometimes late at night, I still feel her presence, not in a sinister way, but as if she's watching over me from a distance. I don't know what she was or where she came from, but I do know this: she wasn't entirely evil. Somewhere, buried beneath the darkness, there was still a trace of the grandmother I had loved,